910. This is Chad here, and you're listening to My Alien Life.
3 short months, just like he did with the plagues of Egypt, God has taken away everything we worship. God said, you want to worship athletes? I will shut down the stadiums. You want to worship musicians? I will shut down civic centers. You want to worship actors? I'll shut down theaters. You want to worship money? I will shut down the economy and collapse the stock market. You don't want to go to church and worship me? I will make it to where you can't go to church. And then it's perfect. They quote 2 Chronicles. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Maybe we don't, then they go into, maybe we don't need a vaccine. Maybe we need to take this time of isolation from the distractions of the world and have a personal revival on where we focus on the only thing in this world that really matters, Jesus.
My Alien Life is recorded live from atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is available on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, and everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is at www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you will find my email address, all previously recorded shows, and more. I am Cameron Brower. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Three, two, 1, 0, and liftoff.
My guest tonight is an active member of the Advent International Order of Exorcists, which is affiliated with the Old Roman Catholic Church. He undoubtedly helped me create one of my favorite podcasts that I've listened to more than 5 times just myself. And it's great to have back Timothy Earl. Mr. Earl, thank you so much for joining me again, and welcome.
Just 5 times?
Well, there's other. I have a couple other favorites, but if you if you listen to me talk about, I've actually talked about you on several podcasts, and when we did that last podcast, we talked about exorcism, and I let everybody know, I started out just this time of day, and we talked quite a bit at first, and then started recording the podcast, and it got dark, and I hadn't turned any lights on in the house, and
oh no!
So by the end of it, I mean, literally, I was like, my skin was crawling, and it was a good one. I mean, that's a good one. I mean,
I don't want to size you up by any means, but I was on Jimmy Black, his Fade to Black radio show. Okay, so I was on his, and I let him play one of an EVP that we have that we're pretty confident is true Enochian, the demon introducing itself. And he played that over and over and over throughout the cast. And I ended up getting hate mail from people who were terrified of what they were listening to.
So that's one of those things that I don't care who you are, you can relate to that. I mean, you have UFO people, you have people who love haunted houses and everything and in between and Sasquatch, but that's like one of those things that I just really don't think that there isn't anybody that wouldn't get to. And if anybody's ever watched The Exorcist, I'm sure that was fairly a movie that kind of stuck with him. And again, that podcast stuck with me, and it was a lot of fun, but you're talking about real stuff there.
Right. And we have a lot of real stuff going on today, don't we?
It's real, man.
I mean,
yeah.
This
It's
this is biblical.
right. What do you think about that?
Well, there's a lot of people who late last year and beginning of this year, and even still talking about it, just felt something big was on the horizon. Something was changing. There's a lot of, a lot of full moons, a lot of aligning of the constellations, and I'm sorry, I'm not really into that, so I really can't repeat it intelligently. But there was a lot of that activity, and people were getting excited about that. But everybody, at least in my circle, and my circle is not just exorcists or people, even just Catholics. I have friends from all over the religious perspective, and psychics and seers and things of the nature, and they're all serious about and passionate about the same ministry that I'm involved in. So we look at things quite a bit differently. So our circle, we were seeing something different, something vastly different, a change coming, kind of, and we knew it was going to be big. We didn't know how big, but we felt like it was going to be on the other side of it was going to be a new beginning, a renewal, so to speak. And people were really talking about this, I'd say, as early as last September. They felt it. So hindsight's always 20/20, right? So you can always look back and say, hey, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that. But this particular one, I would say a lot of people actually felt that this was coming. And, we have yet to see the other side of it. So hopefully they're right, that it's absolutely a reset that society really needed.
Well, and you said I love the word that you used just a minute ago, and that was renewal. So there's some hope there. There's some hope there.
Absolutely, there's hope. We look for patterns, and numerology within the Bible is always something that we pay attention to, too. Did you realize it took 3 months for this coronavirus to get to a head to shut us all down?
Right.
The number 3 is pretty significant here.
Yep.
And, we can review it if you wanted to, but I think all your listeners will shake their head up and down, the number 3, whether, it can also be bad, but it's also the sign of the Trinity. There's 3 feasts. It's just all sorts of positive references in the Bible when it comes to the number 3. So to us, when number 3 is involved, we absolutely do see something positive on the other side. And God has He has a history of tearing things down and building things up, right? Did
you see any of my posts that I put up yesterday on Facebook? Probably not, but right, we're right in the middle of a pandemic, and so I sat down last night and was recording a podcast and was actually writing it, and it was 5 minutes or about 7 minutes to 6 o'clock, an earthquake, and I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" And
I saw you posting real time about the earthquake.
So I'm sitting here thinking, you know what? I'm just going to sit here and take it in, because I mean, if this is it, I want a front row seat and I'm ready, and, so it lasted about 25 seconds and I'd yelled to my wife to come and I said, she said, what? I said, earthquake. And she said, really? And she's walking around and and I said, no, just sit, feel it. And so she just missed it. But, there was that. And then this morning woke up to a raging blizzard, just frozen everything. I mean, literally, the flowers were blooming in front of the house yesterday. And this morning, I can't even get out of the driveway and ice storm and then snow on top of that. And, it was just a little much, happening at the same time. And, but,
that would be overwhelming.
I do believe in the renewal. I do. I loved when you texted me the other day about the reset, and that helped a lot.
Well, And, a lot of people have been asking for it for a long time, no matter what political spectrum you're on,
Absolutely.
they're pointing at each other. But
Right.
I really think that everybody was probably pointing at themselves, and we'll be okay out of this. I look at the latest trend or what the government's saying, that it's going to get worse before it gets better, but it also is flattening out, and it's not as bad as they thought it was going to be. A lot of mixed messages, but at the end of it, I hope that we all take a moment and bring things in perspective. A lot of people are just seeing things differently now. It's, a lot of jokes, a lot of memes. I think one of my favorite memes out there right now is the one thing that I've learned from this coronavirus is that we'll just keep memeing till the world takes us out.
Yeah.
So
my first question I wanted to say, I'm looking at what we have ahead of us as an opportunity for something great, because, we need that. And it certainly looks like we need to reconnect, because I feel that we're missing each other, and right now we're missing each other, and we can't stand to socially distance ourselves. And there's so many people breaking the rules right now that it's insane.
I saw a news report out of LA where 25 police officers or so broke up a 1-year-old's birthday party.
Wow.
Can you believe that? That's where we've gotten to.
And you come here and just life goes on,
A lot of apocryphal type events just taking place. You don't know what direction this is going to go, but I am pretty confident that it's not going to get to the point of a complete end of the world. I just don't see this as an end of the world event. It's just an opportunity for renewal. And I think it's been coming for a long time. As a religious person as I am, and not just spiritual, but actual religious, I see, God being taken out of the schools. I see God being taken out of the public sphere. I personally think that the great lie is that there is no God, right? And then, what is the reaction? In fact, I'm going to read you something. I didn't write this, but it's perfect. I want to read you this. It's from somebody anonymous, but I thought it was just perfect for what we're experiencing. It goes, in 3 short months, just like he did with the plagues of Egypt, God has taken away everything we worship. God said, you want to worship athletes? I will shut down the stadiums. You want to worship musicians? I will shut down civic centers. You want to worship actors? I'll shut down theaters. You want to worship money? I will shut down the economy and collapse the stock market. You don't want to go to church and worship me? I will make it to where you can't go to church. And then it's perfect. They quote 2 Chronicles. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Maybe we don't, then they go into, maybe we don't need a vaccine. Maybe we need to take this time of isolation from the distractions of the world and have a personal revival on where we focus on the only thing in this world that really matters, Jesus. And, at a time, with the thought of renewal, and you take this, and, there is a passage out there that it fits this perfectly, right? And that's Isaiah 26, where God tears the system down, he rebuilds it, and he brings you into his house for the sake of safety and in renewal and a revival. It's just this, whoever wrote this knew exactly what was taking place.
I think to me, the biggest lesson is that, we're dealing with a virus and a pandemic, but at the same time, we're doing all that to ourselves.
I think so. If you look at the way people reacted, running out and buying up toilet paper. I mean, just completely irrational. You know, and I'm about to go off on a separate rant about the lack of humanity that we're seeing here, right? But we absolutely are doing this to ourselves. You look at the government and the media. I mean, the government can't even get together to help resolve this. There's so much bickering going on that the bills were delayed. You can't understand what's coming out of our leadership. The media has absolutely created a level of hysteria that just does not need to be. It's just, I think the true pandemic is humanity, or the lack of humanity and the lack of understanding.
Right. It's almost like we're given a mirror. The virus is a mirror, and we get to look at ourselves going through this whole process. And it's quite a process. But historically speaking, haven't we had renewals? And you mentioned one, but in the past, because humans have such a wicked record, it's just, I would like to see that on some sort of chart or a graph. It would look like a coronary event, just ups and downs.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is the longest living nation that's been out there now. Except for Rome, am I correct? Now I'm taxing myself.
Well, we're a bit of we're kind of recent, and but Rome had a pretty good long run there, and it was pretty powerful and pretty wicked in its own right.
Absolutely, but yeah, that was torn down and rebuilt upon. Every nation has been. I don't think that we have a government system in place that dates beyond the states anyway, by any means. And we're, even as modern and as enlightened as we like to think we are, we're still tearing that down and rebuilding. And I think that certainly in the first world, when things happen to us, we're just surprised because we think we're untouchable. How dare that happen to us? One of my, I'm blessed to travel to foreign lands for my company, and I go to places that aren't popular. So I go to India, and I go to the industrialized areas of India, and I see what poverty truly is, and I see how these people have to live, and they don't have hope for something better for themselves. They're living in the streets, children living on cardboard on the sidewalks, and then I come home and I see just how untouched these kids are for what they have. Maybe this is the bringer down of spiritual pride. I mean, we're so full of ourselves. Maybe this needs to happen to show us just exactly what the rest of the world lives like.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was in the Philippines, and I'm in a downtown area with lots of rich businesses and lots of activity, and there's family living. I saw one family living on the street, and none of them had any clothes, nothing, not any clothes, and cardboard. And I mean that for this guy, that's the first time that I'd ever got to witness that, and I'll never forget it. And I was so shocked. I mean, I was just unbelievably shocked, just to the core.
And I know this is kind of off topic, but when you're experiencing that, I'm going to ask you, how do you feel when you hear people say, I spent $5,000 on saving this puppy's life,
right? When
that $5,000 could have gone out and fed and clothed a child.
One thing that I did notice too is, I always thought, what would I do? How could I fix that? And I thought, if I ever did come into money, I would love to be able to fix that or help some part of that or some community. But what I did see, I saw that same thing in reverse. I saw some of the happiest people that I've ever seen in my life that had literally nothing, in the same area, in the same place. And that was nice. I mean, that was a huge lesson that I also never forgot.
Yeah. I was blessed to visit Romania and spent my birthday talking to drinking with Palenka. That's what they called it, Palenka, and wine with the locals. And they were so humble. They don't have anything, but they're sure happy to share. And they just love the zeal of life. They love the little nuances of experiences and things that you and I'll just say I wouldn't normally notice. They do. And I just really wish that before anybody has an opportunity to take office, they should spend just a week in those people's shoes so to understand what it truly is to be humble and, just have an affinity for the basics of what you need. C'est la vie.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Bible. And I'd like to know what, anybody that, and it doesn't have to be anybody that has even read the Bible, but one of the books that comes up is the book of Revelations, and it talks about Armageddon. And what does Revelation say about Armageddon?
Well, you have to look at what Armageddon actually is. So it's a transcribed word from Hebrew, right? And I'm not going to be able to speak it in Hebrew, but it's a strong hill, and Mageddon is an actual hill where there's a fort, and that fort is actually built upon the ruins of previous forts. Is what created this hill. It's absolutely not a natural hill, and it was to guard trade routes. And the battle between Gog and Magog is to take place in the valley. But if you go back to Armageddon, strong hill, now you're talking about a fortified hill, right? And when you're talking about a fortified hill, you're talking about the strong arm of the government. So you can look at it as metaphorically as control, power, absolute control, absolute power, and you're under the oppression of this power. So that's what we, or at least myself and my circle, look at as far as what Armageddon actually is.
And I know
that throw you for a loop there.
No, but even in Islamic theology, it's also mentioned, and so it was something then that wasn't unheard of, and was prophetic and was well known.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a real place. It is an actual physical place you can go touch. It's been discovered. We talk about the Battle of Armageddon and the battle, between the two warring nations, Gog and Magog. And we could sit and probably have a whole conversation just about who those nations are to be. But to fill the valley knee high in blood, right? It's going to be a complete wipeout. There's a very real chance that this could actually take place. Jerusalem has, forgive me, I'm not going to be able to remember the actual name of it, but they actually have just I'm going to call it the Hail Mary path. That is, they're surrounded by nations that absolutely want their destruction. That's all they want. They just want to destroy Israel. Man, woman, child. They just want to plow them under. So Israel is a nuclear armed nation, and some of these nations who want to destroy them have nuclear weapons as well. So they have a plan in place of mutually assured destruction, and that in where they will send those nukes up and bring them straight back down to destroy not only themselves, but take down everybody with them. So in that true sense, in today's times, there's already a plan in place to bring forth the prophecy of the Battle of Armageddon. So it could legitimately happen if that plan was put forth.
So if that's the last battle between good and evil before the day of judgment, is the day of judgment the absolute end, or is that another reset?
Mm-mm. That's another reset. We have so once we have the battle of Armageddon, Christ takes the throne, and we will have heaven on earth for 2,000 years. And there's a lot of debate at the end of that. Why? Because it's not very clear. But then the earth is destroyed, and heaven is transformed into the heavens. Truly what we would think about the heavens. But the first heaven on earth is legitimate action that Christ takes after we experience the end times.
So is there a differentiation between Armageddon and end time? What's the difference there? Armageddon's the battle?
I think it's one's personal perspective. Everybody thinks that the end time is the coming of Christ, and they mark that by the series of events. So I don't know if you're, a lot of people don't even believe in tribulation, but there's this to be theorized as 7 years of tribulation, and halfway through, at the beginning of tribulation, the Antichrist will take the rounds. Halfway through, the Antichrist reveals themselves. So for the next 3.5 years, mankind is trying to overthrow the Antichrist. And the Antichrist will take his seat in Israel, in Jerusalem, at the temple. So the temple is rebuilt. So that places him right there where, Mageddon or Armageddon is actually at. And the end battle is when Christ rolls in and has a helping hand, so to speak. So there's a lot of new archaeology that's actually taking place that's kind of starting to drum things up a little bit. There's a new theory out there that the temple is not actually at the Temple Mount where we think it is. If you look at the Temple Mount, the way it is laid out, and you transcribe it back into not only the scripture, but other documents of the time describing Roman forts, it is absolutely looking like that is actually a Roman fort. Now, if you follow the directions out of the Bible, out of the Old Testament, you leave the fort and you go down to the temple, and people have followed these pathways, so to speak, through not just metaphorically, but literally out of the Temple Mount. And there is a temple, an ancient temple that they found buried there, and they're just now starting to unearth this thing. So some of this is getting really thrust into the limelight right now with a whole fresh new look as into what the Bible was really, what the book of Revelations is really prophesizing, and does it fit into modern times? And unfortunately, again, it's in hindsight, you just never know if you're really looking at the right angle, so to speak, until it's actually come to pass. So, the battle, when I said we'd argue about who was taking place in that battle, Gog and Magog, everybody says it's Jerusalem and Russia. Well, there's a lot of new information that it's actually Israel and Russia, that it's not going to be Israel, that it might be actually Egypt and Russia. And in the end, we just don't know. We won't know until it's already come to pass.
Interesting. So the book of Revelations is, you have people out there who've never read the Bible and often go to the book of Revelation, so because it's prophetic and it's apocalyptic and it's fairly dark. So why the popularity there, if that's even the right word?
I think people are just drawn to things that are just dark. I mean, one of the things that people are really drawn to are the four horsemen, right? Bringing death, pestilence, war. That imagery has been seen all over art, has been seen in just so many, written into so many songs. And what is attractive about it, if you're not a Christian and you're not looking at this from the eyes of God, then what's your attraction to it? I can't answer that. And I see that a lot, especially if people know I'm a demonologist. I kind of shake my head at this. I actually get a set of groupies coming at me, and these groupies are kind of gothic. They are absolutely dark in personality. They've absolutely interacted with and interested in the occult, and they interpret that as a need to be able to get involved in fighting demons or controlling demons, and hence they're attracted to, little fat guy from Wichita, Kansas. So the attraction is something that's overpowering to the senses. But the book of Revelations is by all means a complete mystical writing that I've heard so many prophecies out of that book. I couldn't even begin to understand which one would ring true or not. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that there's one person out there that can look and interpret that book and be absolutely precise into what the intent was?
No, it's amazing to me too that, so I was looking, and I'm jumping ahead just a little bit. I was looking at the book of Isaiah, and there is an actual, this website, Bible Gateway, which will actually give you every version of that. And there's so many. I
have a bookmark.
I can't even tell you. I mean, there's got to be 25 different versions of that. And, everything from every version of the Bible that you've ever heard, and many that you've never heard of. Most of them, I don't think most people have heard of. Just a lot of versions.
I used to tell people to open up the Bible and read it, let it speak to them, and in large part that's still true. But I still think that you need to have an educated person to be able to somewhat lead you through it. The different versions can be very misleading, especially when it comes to the interpretation of the root words. I was hoping that when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found such a long time ago, but they were actually really keen to light and the promenade in the 80s, and then of course they continue to really be brought out with they're still interpreting them. Some of the burnt scrolls they're reading through, some ones that they can't open, and coming out with again new interpretations of the same text. So I was hoping that when that was being released to the world, that would be the end of it. This is it. This is what the text is. There's no argument. But even the Essenes back in the day were arguing over what the version of the story was. So no, we're here to interpret it to ourselves, so to speak.
My neighbor, he died a couple of years ago, but his name was Eugene Peterson, and he wrote a version called The Message, the Bible in contemporary language, and which is pretty remarkable. And he's a biblical scholar, and he was just one of those people that could talk endlessly about that, and I just missed the chance, and had somebody that was so close by that I used to see almost every Sunday. Sad that I missed that, and the book is out there everywhere, and it's highly acclaimed, but just another version of that, and it's just amazing that there's been so many, and there probably will continue to be.
Well, there are. So somebody reached out to me just the other night, and they say, "Hey, have you read this King Solomon's Temple and the Seals of King Solomon?" And you know, a lot of people are really into non-canonical books and their meanings because they, somewhat parallel or feed off of the Torah or the Old Testament and or even the New Testament, and they seem almost like spin-off. But we got to be careful of some of these because this very book that this gentleman reached out to me with, it was actually first. Nobody knows who wrote it, and the oldest copy of the oldest date that anybody can get to is the mid 1800s. So, did God have a hand in writing something in the mid 1800s? Absolutely, God could do that. But if you look at what the text is about, to me, it's moreover a fantasy that somebody came up with and put it down on paper, and it kind of took off. So all these different in versions, they kind of scare me because I think that they can lead not just the different books that are non-canonical, but the different versions of the canonical books can actually get a little scary into what the intent behind the author is. So it would have been really neat to have that perspective from your neighbor. What was his intent? How did he interpret it? And did that actually transcribe into the way he put it out into the new text?
Isn't that amazing that somebody would do that though now? I mean, just one person. I mean, obviously he had help, but obviously he probably interviewed plenty, but it's just amazing that somebody would spend their life in doing that kind of work because it's a huge undertaking.
Absolutely. Did he? You don't know much about him, or
sure I do.
Why he?
I don't know why, and it's in the book, and it's I would recommend anybody picking that up. I mean, it's not a version of the Bible that's going to turn you off, or it's the Bible. But again, there's just I don't even know if anybody knows how many versions of the Bible there are, but. The King James version, so many people are familiar with, but they don't know the history and why that was put together. It's an interesting process, and biblical scholars for so long have put it to themselves to do that, and it's miraculous that they've decided that, and I can't even imagine.
Yeah, we even have different amount of books in the Bible. So I moved that mouthpiece back. We, Catholics have more books in the Bible than Protestants do, but then Anglican Catholics or Orthodox have more books than Catholics do. I think that in the end, it's all what you're going to read into it. Kind of like, and I'm going to go full circle back into what we're reading into today's activities. I mean, today's pandemic. You're asking if this is the end times, I think, and absolutely not. This would not be the end times, because if you look at the book of Revelations, just like you spoke about, there's 7 trumpets, and these trumpets, after each trumpet, there's an event, and I can't even look back to see. I can't find any of these trumpets taking place, not metaphorically, nor not literally. So in that true sense of the book of Revelations, I don't think that we're anywhere near what most would interpret as the end times would be, meaning the ushering in of the Antichrist. I just don't see that taking place. But it doesn't necessarily mean that this couldn't launch something in the future. I don't want to take away hope from anybody out there, but I just don't think this is it. I think if this is a true reset, I think God is upset that we took him out of the equation where he needed to be, and he is absolutely using this as an opportunity to reset our government, and we just have to take an opportunity ourselves, take this opportunity to read into it to what it needs to be.
With so many resets in history, it makes me feel that we're a work in progress and maybe not a lost cause. So why does that override free will? Why does something happen to point us in the right direction that seems to be contrary to the free will that you actually talked about on the last show you were with me, which was very interesting.
I don't know. Have we lost free will though? It's kind of like a parent teaching their child between good and right. The child was going to end up making decisions on their own.
And I think too, one of the things I've thought about real deeply about this is the fact that, we have biological resets already built in. I mean, if we get too dirty, if the planet gets too dirty, things shut down. And obviously, we found something buried somewhere that we shouldn't have touched. And that's maybe a population problem or an overpopulation of an area problem that, it just seems like such a natural, automatic thing to me, but to others, it looks so foreign. And so they just can't conceive the fact that could happen naturally. It's got to be a biological warfare. It's got to be aliens. It's got to be whatever else, but what it really probably is.
Well, there's one other theory about this, and let's go ahead and get conspiratorial.
Let's do it.
Is that a word? Did I just make up a word?
It is now. So yeah, I think I've heard that.
All right. We're going to do it. Okay. So true story. And I actually went ahead and dug into it just to make sure it was a little true. There's absolutely a Harvard professor of biological biological chemistry. And I know it's probably not the real degree, but it's as close as I'm going to be able to get it on the spot. He was arrested for assisting the Chinese in setting up a biological lab, and it is a biological warfare lab there in Wuhan. And simultaneously, when they meaning our FBI, arrested this doctor, they also arrested 2 Chinese men trying to leave the country right away, and one of them was carrying, an awful lot of literature associated with biological genetics or something of that nature, and the other one a bunch of cash. And one of them was an absolute Chinese Army regular person. So, it's real interesting how China turned around and said that the U.S. created this virus, the U.S. Army created this virus and planted it when this over here was actually taking place.
Yeah.
Just putting it out there.
So we're writing new pages in history every day, and we're going to be talking about this. We're going to look into this pretty deep, and it's probably going to be for a very, very long time.
So it happens in threes, right? We talked about how important the number is, but we also remember your mother telling us it happens in threes. Well, so it happens in threes. We had the grounding of the 737. That was unprecedented. The 737 is 1% of our GDP. It had huge ripples throughout the aerospace, about not just the aerospace industry, but the supporting industries peripheral to that. In Wichita, when people were furloughed last year, restaurants that were struggling had to finally close. There were all sorts of tool shops that closed because the guys weren't able to go buy their people weren't able to go buy their tools, weren't buying the tools. Harley Davidson's, that's one of the things that happens here. Whenever there's a downturn in the economy here associated with aerospace, because we're so tied into it, the price and cost of Harley Davidson motorcycles plummet here. I was able to buy a 2006 883 Sportster, the smaller Sportster, for $1,700, and it only had 4,000 miles on it. So it happens in threes. We have the 37, grounding of the 737. We have the coronavirus, COVID-19. What next? What's going to come to us next?
I think it's interesting too that we rely on China so much, and it's but we're such different cultures, yet we rely on these people so much. And there's a symbiotic relationship there for sure, but to what degree? I
think that's going to be one of the resets as well. They made a true mistake in threatening us by withholding the medical production, and that will not go unheard. It has not gone unheard. There's already legislation being written in the work to be brought forth, and even my company, and I can't say the name of it because I'm about to kind of throw them under the bus, but I mentioned I'm a procurement agent, and we were placing work there. And now that they've threatened in that manner, the stability of the supply chain is something that a $9 billion, kind of outing my company, but a $9 billion company takes seriously. So there's a lot more conversations that are taking place at the grassroots level of even just placing new work there, let alone taking a look at what's already there. So I think we're going to see that absolutely change here in the near future.
So, this is interesting because during, post 9/11, but starting, about 2008, of course, when our economy started having its big problems, probably not the biggest now, but big problems. I read something about that there was 8,000, right at the beginning, 8,000 Chinese factories that were basically non-existent every day. They died because it was so bad there economically, and people don't realize what that would even look like. 8,000 a day, and it went up to as high as like 15,000 factories just were gone a day. They don't realize that there's factories that may be as big as my living room that produce something that most people use every day, and they do it very cheaply. And for an example, like right now, and I used this just to buy some giveaways for my podcast and kind of to be topical about China and whatever. But back in the end of January, I started going on eBay and just seeing what I could get shipped to me for a penny. So an American 1 cent. So sitting in front of me is a pile of packages, and I've been getting them. They've really slowed down over the last 3 weeks or so, but I only get like one a day. But I'm getting items that I paid between 1 and 16 cents for, all the way from China, shipped to me like a small jade elephant or a small jade bracelet, or one was like 10 guitar picks, and but for 1 penny, shipped all the way here, off of eBay. So there's 1,006,000 different industries there, and in certain cities there's one every 10 feet, and those are literally things that we rely on every day, and to have that ability to trade in that manner. There's people here locally that, I know that they sell things, and they do go to carnivals and set up on weekends and on street fairs and things like that, and all this stuff that's coming from China that they paid literally nothing for. The numbers don't even add up, but yet, we take that for granted, and it's going to be different.
And do you think that we'll be prepared for that? I hearken what you say because I downloaded the Wish app, and
yeah, there you go. That's
$100.
exactly. Yeah.
Right. To spend $100,
right.
and I'm getting a delivery every day for the next 4 months.
Right.
And you're right. You've nailed it on the head. I've seen these little shops that you talk about. I went to an aerospace shop there in China once, and they took me through the back roads, up the hills, down the valley, literally mountain pass roads to get to this village. And this village we walk in and, there's the goats running, the sheep running. It was the quintessential Chinese village people. And there's a hut, kind of a shanty, that on the edge of a creek. And this creek was running, and they had a paddle wheel out there that was being driven by the creek. And we walked inside, and this paddle wheel was driving the old leather strap system to drive different tools, pieces of equipment around that shanty. And one of them was a lathe. And this lathe, this guy was, I kid you not, machining precision aerospace bushings. Now, they weren't the highly polished ground bushings that only you can get with CNC machinery, but they were the standard. I know you're not in the industry, but they're the standard NAS bushings, but they're still, to the tolerance of the thickness of a human hair, 30 thousandths. And they didn't have a quality problem. They didn't have a delivery problem. They were manufacturing acceptable aerospace parts with the proper documentation to the origins of the material that we need, coming out of a shanty like that.
Yeah.
The resolve of the people of China is something that I think the rest of the world, and it's just not China. You can go to India. You can go to just about any country that honestly runs on the back of the labor of the poor, but still the resolve of those people is really, truly something. And if we're so used to this cheap economy, wait till we're paying $6,000-$7,000 for an iPhone, and let's see who gets upset.
Right. And I was, I watched a couple travel vloggers rather on YouTube. And, this was funny because it really wasn't part of the video at all, but they were going through this big building, and, I don't even remember what was going on, but I just noticed that they walked past through this room, and there was these two guys in there making graphite Bauer hockey sticks. Just two guys in a room. There was hardly anything in there, a table and some tools. And then I was in the Philippines, and it was like 1:00 in the morning, and this was last May, and my wife were out for a walk, and we walked by this storefront, and I looked back in there, and this garage door was open. There was two guys back there making LA Laker jerseys, and they were sewing on these big numbers, and it's everywhere, it's anywhere in Asia but more likely in China, but it's amazing that, just shiploads of stuff come out of there every day. And just the fact that it even gets to me is unbelievable, because I don't even know how that works. And, it's crazy, but, yeah. I also wanted to ask you about, one of the things that, in my opinion, it'd be easy as an outsider now to look down on the earth and decide, enough is enough. Why can't we decide that and just change for the better?
I think we both probably danced around the very answer to that. Aren't we just too selfish? As a species, as a race, as people, as individuals, this pandemic even showed us with the hoarding and how we treated each other and just the stores. We're too selfish. We can't. We all want that. Perfect example. And I have friends in Hollywood. I'm not going to name any, but
oh, come on.
a lot of them I truly respect. And absolutely, they're not the dimwits that people think they are. Okay. But when Hollywood starts preaching that we need to do away with capitalism and usher in socialism so that everybody's on an equal playing field, they are the biggest hypocrites to be able to do that and walk back into their $7 million mansion with a $30 million nest egg and $1 million annually coming in. When people who preach enlightenment can give it up to get that enlightenment, I'll believe him. Jim Carrey is Jim Carrey, I don't know him. He's a perfect example. A lot of what he says, I like. I've heard him. He said some crazy things, just like anybody does. I say them every day to myself usually. But Jim Carrey is stinkingly wealthy. Okay, bud, give some of that up. You can retire off of $5 million very comfortably. Give the rest of it up. And they're not doing it. So we're selfish. We're selfish people. We just absolutely think we want the best, but when it actually comes to self-sacrifice, we can't do it. And that's actually, and I think we talked about it a little bit on the last time we got together, and that is absolutely my biggest issue in the ministry that I'm partaking in, and that is people want salvation without the work, without the sacrifice. So you ask, why can't we just choose to make a difference and make a change, put words in your mouth, become enlightened, so to speak. It's because we're all too selfish. We don't want to put the work or the effort in to actually be that person. I'm convinced. I'm almost disillusioned over it.
Yeah. I wanted to talk briefly, well, not briefly, as long as you want to, about Isaiah 26:20, but chapter 26, as long as we're talking about the Bible, it's very prophetic and pretty amazing. But is that our hope, our redemption?
I think that it's absolutely something that we should look at and we should take solace in. First, when he talks about having a strong city, God's talking about salvation for ourselves. He's talking about building up a foundation around us. He talks about bulwark and he talks about walls, but he's actually talking about us putting up a spiritual foundation. This house isn't a literal interpretation. It is a spiritual interpretation. So when we give up, when we have what we're going through, and you see it all over the place. I'm having fun on social media, what has this pandemic taught you? And people are just really commenting. And so many people are actually commenting that they're realizing that they actually don't have to have all these things. A lot of them are becoming or getting back into the spirituality, if not even coming back to God. There was at least 4 people who have reached out to me saying, now that I've got this downtime, I've actually picked up the Bible and I've actually started reading it to listen to what it tells me. And even some millennials are starting to read it and actually reaching out with some questions. And I think that's really what God's talking here when he's talking about having this strong city. So in Isaiah 26, we tear it down and we're building it back up. And so I hope people take the opportunity to build this back up as to what God's trying to show us here. And once we build these protections for ourselves and live within his city or live within God, right? Live within the word of Christ, then he's going to protect us. And that's, he's bringing us salvation. He's bringing us protection. And this salvation and protection is going to keep out those who are not righteous. It's going to keep the gates closed on the nations of the self-righteous. And I think that this is actually what this particular reset button is. It's a spiritual awakening in the true sense of what God's trying to show us in Isaiah.
And I think, so that we're talking about Isaiah 26, chapter 26. And then to me, verse 20 is an absolute punch in the gut. I mean, if it doesn't grab you and just lift you up and give you a little shake and tell you to open your eyes, then you may be lost. But it says, Go, my people, enter your rooms and shut the doors behind you. Hide yourself for a little while until his wrath has passed by. Wow.
So is that what made you think of it? Did you when everybody's quarantined, when we were first quarantined, I was actually thinking of all the times God does put people into a situation like this. So Isaiah, absolutely. But we also have to look at the Passover, right? We don't necessarily paint lamb's blood on the front of our door, but we are taking certain precautions against this pandemic.
Right.
So I wonder how many, and I asked myself coming into this podcast, how many instances are there that God has sheltered his people for their own protection? And I'm taking that upon myself to actually go look.
I'm sure somebody's probably looked. I hate to say, I hate to say Google it, because that's probably one of the things that got us in trouble in the first place. But yeah. But it's very prophetic, and when reading that or other verses, do you ever just want to if let's say you found 50 others, do you ever just want to run out and yell at people to stop and behave, or stop and fix what they've broken instead of continuing on? I mean, it's really hard. People don't listen.
So one day, I actually went to seminary a little bit. One day, I was feeling awfully proud of myself and awfully moved, as I thought. And I was preaching, I was waving the Bible, I was doing everything. And I could just show my passion. His crotchety old priest comes up, gently lays his hand on my shoulder, and says, God wants us to be passionate, not freaks. So no, I haven't ran out and grabbed anybody by the head to say, look, but I sure want to. Oh, I sure want to. To me, it's how can you deny the word when it so fits our situation? Anyway, now you got me going.
Back when I was a kid, I lived in a town, lived right by the church. And of course that was the church we went to. There's about 100 people in that town. And one day, a revival came to town for just 2 days. And, that was something, nothing ever came to that town. So, it was pretty amazing to see even something like that and how they put that together. And it was a family, and I went, and, I think I just went alone because it was just across the street. And I don't think my parents went with me. I know they didn't, but, I remember, one of the family members who put this thing together afterwards, I was standing outside. He came out and he was all sweaty and I mean, he did most of it. And, he said to me, he goes, wow, he goes, this place is awesome. And I thought, I didn't think it was so awesome. I mean, there's really nothing to do there ever. And it was too hot in the summer and windy and nothing there. And, he goes, this has got to be the most fun one person could possibly have. He said, I just love this. This is so much fun. I thought, there was nobody there, it's just this family, maybe me and 10 other people, but, it was that kind of enthusiasm that was really infectious. I never forgot about it. And, it was just something I always thought about. And, I think anytime you have an important message, that enthusiasm, that interest is what drives you. But in this case, there's more there to that, of course. And, I just never will forget that. But, give me just, we got like 2 minutes. I want to give you the last word and, the final word on this podcast. And, what do you want to tell people, and, what reaction would you like to get in the ultimate outcome? I mean, what are you thinking?
Even if someone's not religious or spiritual, I think that they still need to be able to find some calm and solace in knowing that we will come out of this. If you want to play the numbers game and understand that you're not going to get sick, that's one thing. And if you want to look at the government for financial protection, that's another. But at the end of it all, we'll get through this. We'll get by this. generations before us have seen pandemics that came and gone. It wasn't the end of the world. It wasn't the end times. Yes, things did change, and the change is what we can control. Maybe not on a macro level, but on a nucleus level, us individually, we can come out of this better than we were before as individuals. And if enough of us do that, then as a society, we'll come out of this better than we were before. And people just have to keep that type of faith.
Tonight, Timothy, Earl, and I are attempting to save humanity, and I think everyone now needs to do the same and ultimately save each other. Timothy is with the Advent International Order of Exorcists, and I'd like to thank you so much for joining me, and I would absolutely love to have you back again. Timothy, Earl, thank you so much for joining me, and God bless you.
God bless you.
My Alien Life Podcast.
You can find my website at www.myalienlifepodcast.com, and please subscribe to my latest downloads at iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and at podbean.com. And please follow me and like me on Facebook and Twitter. My Alien Life is written and produced for broadcast at Studio 254 in the Northern Rocky Mountains. The music you are hearing is produced and created by Elion. You can find all Elion's work online at Heart Dance Records.